Hello and welcome to the podcast Justice Unbound about women, religion, and the State of Israel. Justice Unbound is written and produced by the Center for Women's Justice, CWJ. I'm your host, Rivkah Lubitch. Susan Weiss, my co-host for this podcast, isn't with us today, but she'll be back in the next episode when we talk more about what goes on behind the closed doors of the religious courts in Israel, the Beit Din. This time we're doing something else. I'm sure that our listeners already know, and if they don't, I'm telling them now, that there is no civil marriage in Israel, and one can only marry according to one's religion. For Jews, that means marrying a Jew of the other sex in a religious ceremony officiated by an Orthodox, needless to say, male rabbi, from a list of rabbis who are licensed to marry through the Rabbinate establishment. This is basically the only way for a Jew to marry in Israel and be recognized by the state as married. In the next episode, Susan and I will be explaining exactly how the whole system of marriage works in Israel and how it all started historically. But that's the next episode. However, today we will be focusing on a rabbinic organization in Israel called Chuppot, founded by Rav Aaron Leibovich, that works outside of the establishment. Chuppot is an independent rabbinic-halachic organization. Its aim is to provide wedding ceremonies for couples who are interested in a wedding in accordance with Jewish law, but are either forced to get married without the authorization of the chief rabbinate or choose, for various reasons, to do so. To be explained. So, I will be interviewing Rabbi Kalman Pesach Chuck Davidson, got in all the names, an American Orthodox rabbi who made Aliyah to Israel in 1991 and is the director of the halachic department at Chuppot. Hello, Rabbi Chuck, and welcome to our podcast.
Hi there, and thank you for inviting me.
It's a privilege to have you here with us today, and thank you for taking time to talk with me about what we both think is extremely important. As you may or may not know, I highly respect you as a Talmid Chacham, as a great person, and as someone who has the bigger picture of the Jewish people in mind. I know you do a lot of work concerning conversion and that you are an expert on the topic of Giyur, but today we will be focusing on your work at Chuppot. So let's start by you telling us why Chuppot was established. What was the need for an organization of rabbis to do something that is done by Orthodox rabbis within the establishment?
Thank you for asking. So I'd like to start off with a quote from Rabbi Jonathan Sachs. It's a quote which I have burned deep into my heart, and I believe it to be true, and that is, "Religion acquires influence when it relinquishes power." That is my guiding light in most of the work that I do in Chuppot. So yes, the Chief Rabbinate does offer religious services, including marriage, in the State of Israel. They do it all in accordance with halakha, as they understand the halakha. Unfortunately, the Rabbinate has a monopoly in the State of Israel on marriage performed in Israel that is recognized by the state. And that is very limiting in terms of who can get married in the State of Israel, how they can get married. And in addition to all of that, the Chief Rabbinate is an organization, a governmental body which has its own problems. It is a very politicized body. It has experienced corruption. All of us living in Israel have seen this, and as a result, I think it's fair to say that since I made Aliyah in 1991, I'm not sure what was before that, but certainly since I made Aliyah in 1991, the Chief Rabbinate has primarily succeeded in distancing Jews from their Jewish identity and from their Judaism. That, in my mind, is the exact opposite of what a rabbi is supposed to do. And therefore, in the realm of marriage, we offer an Orthodox alternative without religious coercion. It is for those who wish to get married according to halakha, but we never, of course, force ourselves on anyone. I think it is very, very important to break the monopoly of the Rabbinut in marriage in Israel. And among the options that should exist are Orthodox options which are not part of the Chief Rabbinate.
Wow, that was fantastic. I couldn't have ever said that better. The corruption, the breaking the monopoly of the Rabbinut, amazing. So Who are the couples actually that turn to Chuppot to be married?
Okay. So the couples that turn to us to marry through Chuppot either choose, they could get married through the chief rabbinate, but they choose not to because the trust that the population, that the citizens have in the chief rabbinate is very, very low and continues to decline. So most of our couples are able to get married through the chief rabbinate, but they do not want a rabbi who represents an organization that they don't believe in to be with them under their chuppah on the most important day of their lives. So I don't know the numbers exactly, but I think it's about 85% of our couples can indeed get married through the chief rabbinate, but choose not to. About 15% of our couples, and I'm not sure of the numbers, but it's approximate, cannot get married through the chief rabbinate for reasons which we believe are not justified, halachically speaking.
So you would look into each couple that comes and say, are they able to get married halachically, and it's not justified that they couldn't have gotten married through the Rabbanut, and we will marry them?
Correct.
Or do you just marry anybody who's Jewish? Do you have red lines?
The red lines are exactly what the halacha, without all of the extraneous stringencies of the Rabbanut. We will never cross any halachic red lines. That will never happen in Chuppot because we're an organization of Orthodox rabbis. But there are many who really could get married according to halacha, but because of the excessive stringencies of the current chief rabbinate, when I say current, I mean the last 30 years, they simply cannot get married. I'll give a couple of examples.
Yeah, give us an example.
So, of course, anyone who converted non-Orthodox cannot get married through the chief rabbinate. We will not marry non-Orthodox converts either. But there are a large number of Orthodox converts who converted in the diaspora and in Israel, converted Orthodox, and the chief rabbinate does not recognize their conversion. We will accept any Orthodox conversion. We don't have a white list or a black list like the chief rabbinate has. They have a white list. It is a very short white list. And there are perfectly halachically legitimate converts who simply cannot get married in the state of Israel. That's one category. Another category is in our approach to a birur yahadut, to checking into a person's being Jewish. Back in 1993, Rabbi Yosef ruled in a responsum that was published, at least in 1993. I'm not sure exactly when he wrote it. He wrote it about the Olim from the former Soviet Union. And what he wrote was the halacha, which has been for the last 2,000 years, still is. And the halacha is that in the language, in halachic language, ha'omer Yisrael ani ne'eman, somebody who says, I'm Jewish, is to be believed unless there is solid basis to suspect that the person is either lying or mistaken. This is what Rav Ovadia ruled in that responsum that was published in 1993 about Olei Russia, about those who made Aliyah from the former Soviet Union. And he says in there explicitly that the fact that these Olim don't know really almost anything about Judaism and don't practice really anything close to anything about Judaism does not constitute a basis to suspect that they're either mistaken or lying. The reason being that for 70 years they were forcefully distanced from their Jewish identity.
And now they can't prove it.
Correct.
It's hard for them to prove it.
Correct. By the way, would you like to hear a personal story about this? I'll tell you a personal story.
Yes, I would, very much.
So I got married a little bit more than 40 years ago. The rabbi who married us is my Rav for the last 42, 43 years, whatever it is. He's Haredi. He's an Ashkenazi Haredi. He has worked very, very hard to stay under the radar. So anyway, he lived in America at the time, and he made Aliyah, I can't remember what year, 1982, something like that. At any rate, when he first met me, I was a student at the University of Maryland, and he did not know or meet anyone in my family, not my mother, not my father, not anybody, and he did not request to see my mother's ketubah, and he married us. Why? Because the halacha is, ha'omer Yisrael ani ne'eman, a person who says he's Jewish is Jewish, unless there's good reason to suspect that he's either lying or mistaken. So that's a personal story. Now, unfortunately, the chief rabbinate did not accept Rav Ovadia's position. If you remember, this was in 1993 that he published the responsum. He completed his role as chief rabbi in 1983. He was already not the chief rabbi. I don't know how much that matters, but the Rabbanut accepted the position of Rav Elyashiv, a leading Haredi Lithuanian posek, who said that one should check chola efshar, as much as possible, one should check. And the Rabbanut has taken that to the extreme. They have taken that to the extreme of checking, go define how much is possible.
It's not only have they taken it to the extreme, but they check and then they recheck. So that is, when they check you and they decide that you're okay and you're Jewish, then people come to get divorced and they say, well, we didn't know how to check 10 years ago. Let's check again. And then they can decide that they're not Jewish. It's terrible.
Exactly.
I have to tell you about the issue of saying that people that converted aren't really Jewish, is that we at CWJ had a number of cases. The very famous Rav Drukman case was our case where the Rabbanut itself, the Dayanim and the Beit Din, said that the conversion that they themselves did was not a proper conversion. Mm-hmm. So they wouldn't accept that she's Jewish. It was awful. And they do this all the time. I'm really surprised of this idea that a Jew doesn't have to be checked at all, because I think even in America they would check. I mean, if you went to, I don't know about your Haredi rabbi, but any rabbi that you would go to get married, they would look at the ketubah of the mother, wouldn't they? Wouldn't they?
I don't know. I honestly don't know what's done in America. I've been here the majority of my life. I should say that practically speaking, in Chuppot, we do check documents. We also sign all of our couples on an affidavit in which they declare in the presence of a lawyer who also signs on the affidavit a number of things. One of them is, I am Jewish according to halacha through the maternal line. So we are actually more machmir than Rav Ovadia, but we use Rav Ovadia as the basis, meaning if nothing comes up that makes us suspicious in their story, in their documents, or anything else, then they're Jewish. Whereas the Rabbanut has taken Rav Elyashiv's position to the extreme. I'll tell you something very interesting. Off the record, I had it was actually a conversation in writing with one of the main movers who worked to create Shorashim. Shorashim is an organization which I think, I'm not sure, is affiliated with Sohar. I might be wrong about that helps people primarily from the former Soviet Union to get documents to prove to the Beit Din Rabbani, to prove to the Rabbanut that they're Jewish. And this person, who was a rabbi, who was very much a leader in getting this organization off the ground, wrote to me. He sort of confessed that it backfired, because as Shorashim got better in finding documents, the Rabbanut simply got more machmir, more stringent. God. And so it all backfired. But, it is what it is.
I think it's wonderful what Rav Ovadia have said, but I'm not sure that even his followers would agree on that if you just say that you're Jewish, you're Jewish.
The truth is, I don't know if his followers follow it or not. I do know that Rav Stav, if I remember correctly, was quoted in the English Jewish media as saying that what Rav Ovadia said is what holds. Again, practically speaking, we don't just rely on them saying, I'm Jewish. We take additional steps. But the basis, the starting point of our checking is Rav
that you
Ovadia's
believe
position.
People.
Exactly.
Amazing. So this leads me to the next question. What happens actually in the next generation? If those people's children want to get married, are they going to have any trouble?
Right. So halachically speaking, anyone who marries through us is halachically married, and therefore they should have the same status as anyone who marries halachically in any community across the world, any Jewish community across the world, whether in the diaspora or, for that matter, in Israel. Haredim often do not marry through the Rabbanut, they marry through the Badats, through their own badats. So the couples who marry through us, halachically speaking, have the same status as anyone who marries halachically in any Jewish community across the world. What will be a generation from now? There's no way of knowing. It depends on the makeup of the Rabbanut in 25 years. And it's sort of guess your best. So what they'll do on the ground, I honestly don't know. Halachically speaking, they should be the same as anyone who is married halachically throughout the world.
So now I want to know what happens when these couples want to get divorced. what do? Do they go to you? Do they go to the Beit Din? And then the Beit Din says, but we don't recognize your marriage. How does it work?
It's a good question. So any couple that marries through Chuppot is married according to halacha, but not according to the state. As a result, any couple that marries through us has two options in terms of the state. They can either live as Yedu'im B'Tzibor, that is common law marriage, in which case they're not registered as married in the Ministry of Interior, or they can marry abroad in the diaspora. Nowadays, you can do it without even leaving Israel in the state of Utah through Zoom, but they can marry civilly abroad, and based on that civil marriage, then register in the Misrat Pnim, in the Ministry of Interior, as married. If a couple is registered as married in the Misrat Pnim, then in the Ministry of Interior, then they must arrange a get through the Beit Din HaRabbani. They must arrange the divorce, that is to say, the get through the Beit Din HaRabbani, the Rabbanut's Beit Din. A couple that marries through us but lives as Yedu'im B'Tzibor, when they get divorced, if and when, hopefully most of them don't, but if and when those who get divorced need to divorce according to halacha, we sign them on a contract between us and the couple. And in this contract, they commit themselves to getting divorced according to halacha if they divorce in a Beit Din or in a way that is acceptable to us. By the way, there are financial sanctions if they break that contract. And then they have a couple of options. They can, of course, go to the Beit Din Rabbani of the Rabbanut and divorce there. The Rabbanut will do that, at least as of today, even though they weren't officially married. Or there are a number of private Batei Din through which they can divorce. It's all done according to halacha, and we know how to accompany them through whatever choice they pick.
I'm just going to bring up one little thing. There would be a problem if a couple doesn't register in Misrat Pnim as married. They didn't go abroad to get married. They just did the halachic wedding, and then he refuses to give her the get or something.
Oh.
And how would she pull him to the Beit Din?
It's a very good question. So that leads me to the documents, the prenup that we sign them off on. To the best of my knowledge, we are the only Orthodox rabbinic organization in Israel that requires a prenup. No
For
prenup,
sure.
No wedding. I think, by the way, it is professional malpractice for any Orthodox rabbi to do a wedding without a good halachic prenup. I see it as professional malpractice. At any rate,
I agree.
Yeah, so we sign them off on a very solid, in my opinion, what is the best halachic prenup, and that is the prenup of CWJ, of the Center for Women's Justice, which includes both this sort of standard agreement, which is if one of the sides refuses to arrange the get, then they are penalized in a very heavy financial penalty. And also a Tanai B'Kiddushin, they marry conditionally. This covers problems that are not covered by the sort of more standard section of the prenup. So it's hard for me to imagine that there will ever be a Mesurat get, a recalcitrant woman who's stuck because her husband will not give her the get. It's hard to imagine that.
That's great. I have one more question, and then I think we'll finish off. Tell us about the rabbis who officiate at the weddings. Is there anything special? Are these the same rabbis that would be on the list of the rabbis in the establishment?
So the rabbis who marry through Chuppot are all Orthodox ordained, including women. All of us have Orthodox ordination. There are Orthodox ordaining institutions for women now in Israel and in the United States. That is an absolute must. Some of them have ordination through the Chief Rabbinate. Others have ordination through other channels. We do have a few rabbis who actually do weddings through the Chief Rabbinate. Of course, that will not be published anywhere. They don't want that to go out in public. But yes, we have any number of rabbis who can and in fact do weddings through the Chief Rabbinate. Most of our rabbis don't.
Did I hear you say that the Chief Rabbinate ordains women, or were you talking about men there?
Men. The Chief Rabbinate does not ordain women. There are women who have been ordained through Orthodox institutions, both in Israel and in the United States, and they are certainly welcome to join our ranks and officiate weddings.
Are you the only organization in the world where Orthodox women officiate at wedding ceremonies?
I would imagine that the IRF, the International Rabbinic Fellowship, has Orthodox ordained women who do weddings. Whether that is done through the United States is very different. It's not organizations that do weddings. You go to your rabbi.
Right. People.
And your rabbi weds you, and that's the end of the story. So I'm not sure what happens in Chutz La'aretz.
Because in Israel, Beit Hillel is the first rabbinic organization that accepted women as rabbaniot, but that doesn't mean that any of these women officiate at weddings.
That is correct. I'll mention one other thing. I think that one very important thing to keep in mind is, it says in the Mishnah in Pirkei Avot, Aseh lecha Rav. You make for yourself a rabbi. You choose your rabbi. Nobody else should be choosing your rabbi. Certainly not a government, certainly not a state, and certainly not a secular state, which is exactly what the Rabbanut is. The Rabbanut is an arm of the secular state of Israel. Now, I'm very happy that the state of Israel, at least in terms of the governmental structure and the laws, is a secular state. I would not want to live in a theocracy. But on the other hand, I don't think it's appropriate for the secular state to get involved in issues of halacha. In this regard, I absolutely agree with the hardline Haredim that the secular state must not be allowed to get involved in issues of halacha, and that's exactly what they do through the chief rabbinate.
Absolutely. And we will finish up on that note. I want to thank you, Rabbi Chuck, for this fascinating conversation. I'm looking forward to having you again as a guest on this podcast.
My pleasure. Thank you so much for the opportunity.
And to our listeners, thank you for joining us and listening to CWJ's podcast, Justice Unbound, Women, Religion, and the State of Israel. We would love to hear your comments and thoughts. Please reach out to us on social media, on the Center for Women's Justice's page, on Facebook, X, Instagram, or LinkedIn. This podcast was produced thanks to the generous support of the Gimprich Family Foundation. Thank you, Hannah Wacholder and Rachel Stomel, for your help. I am Rivkah Lubitch. Goodbye.